Hey.
Hey.
Where are we at?
We are set up in the dining room. Different setup, which may mean the room's a little bit more echoey. But it's because we got an amazing guest with us today.
Hello and welcome to the Resilient Lineage podcast, where we reflect on the past, anticipate the future, and discover what God is up to today. I'm Olivia.
And I'm Milo.
And today we have a very special guest.
We do.
The second guest on our podcast.
Second one.
Yeah. I'm surprised it's not the first.
Well, one we've been talking about having, it was like when we started all of our episode planning. It was just a question of when.
Right.
And what the topic would be.
And so, without further ado, I would like to introduce my mother, Miss Bethany Curtis.
Yeah.
Thank you for inviting me.
Hey, babe.
Hey.
This is so uncomfortable.
Why is it uncomfortable?
It's not uncomfortable. It's like, my mom's like, this is so exciting. This is real official.
It is official.
It is, because we're the Curtises, but.
That's right.
My mom has the biggest grin on her face right now.
And we're so not, people listen to these podcasts in all kinds of different orders, and depending on the title, they may, gravitate towards one or the other. But today's episode is coming out the Tuesday before Mother's Day.
Yeah.
And so as we were talking about how to honor mothers, we thought we'd have
my mom on.
Your mom on.
Yeah.
And so glad you're here.
Thank you.
Thanks for being willing to do this. I know this is not always your favorite thing. Is that a good way to say it?
Yes. But hospitality, I can talk about all day.
Okay.
So
and that's the topic, that's her code for it. Let's get after it.
Yes.
Let's just get into the notes. Cause if we veer too much into like ad-libbing, she's getting nervous because none of this was like officially.
Yes. When my mom gets stressed or just uncomfortable, she has this dimple that comes out, and that's like our cue to change something.
Yeah, that's when you know Bethany's upset. If you see the dimple, that means she's stressed about something. Is that fair?
So they tell me. It's
Anyway.
my secret weapon, all but to me.
It's a great indicator. It makes my life way easier because then I can know how to navigate conversations better. So oftentimes when the reputation we've developed as a family over time has been that when we have people over into our home, they have generally, I think that they have a good experience. Maybe they've had a bad experience and we haven't heard about it. Can you imagine
Like we wouldn't hear it.
Yeah.
No one, not that I've ever met.
Yeah.
Would just be like, that was an awful night.
Yeah. Can you imagine like, hey, thanks for having me over, but here's 7 things you could do to improve your experience. Although there was one time how long, so we had taken our first church. We had been married, maybe a year when we had that guest speaker come through the church, and he stayed in so we stayed in a house that was owned by the church, which is called a parsonage. And so we stayed in the parsonage, and in the parsonage had a basement, and in the basement was like a fully furnished room, little kitchenette, its own bathroom. And we had somebody stay the night with us, which was the first time we had a guest stay the night with us. Do you remember who I'm talking about?
No.
Yes, you do.
We had them stay right away. So
yeah, it was the first person we had stay as our guest. I can't believe this is not, I don't want to say their name.
Oh, okay.
Because they gave us negative feedback. Because they were, you want me to write it down for you? I'll write it on my hand. Here you go.
This is terrible. This is not good.
Oh my gosh. Bethany.
What did that even say?
So did you have your phone in front of you? I'll text it to you because I don't want to say the name out loud because I don't want to it's.
This is like equally as bad.
I know.
Anyway, you had.
Do you see it?
A person.
I just texted it to you. And anyway, we had this person. You don't remember this story. You tell this story all the time. You're giving me this look.
I wouldn't know because I wasn't born yet.
You wouldn't know. Hon, you can talk into the microphone. You're giving me all these nonverbals.
Okay.
You don't remember this? So we had this person over, and it was a significant person in our denomination. And afterwards, they came upstairs and they said, "Oh, by the way, you need to install a full-length mirror down in the quarters down there because there's no mirrors. There's a mirror in the bathroom, but that's it. And there's no way to kind of make sure you're all together. So make sure you get that done." Like that's the only feedback he provided. Which is so to the point of like, do people provide negative feedback about hosting?
Yes.
They do.
I suppose. Yeah.
It's not as common.
Not as common. But generally speaking, I think that's the only time we've really received negative feedback. And I wouldn't even say it was negative. It was helpful. He was right. Because I don't know if you've ever stayed at a place where there isn't a mirror. Like,
it's true.
It's like, oh, are my clothes on straight? Is it, is my hair in the right? I don't have to worry about hair, I suppose, but
my dad's bald.
Yeah.
For those.
But through the years, people I was close to, I would ask, what can I change? What could I add? What didn't you have?
You would ask for the feedback.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. To keep making it better.
Yeah. So for you, why did you set out to make sure that we had a home that was hospitable? Because
absolutely,
I don't think that was part of my thinking when we got married. Not that I was opposed to it.
Yeah,
like I wanted to have friends over, but I don't think.
But we constantly had people over in the parsonage I grew up with, and having special speakers a couple times a year in and out of our home. So I knew I always wanted to have that kind of a home.
Yeah.
So
a home where people could belong and
were hosted well and celebrated and could relax,
made to feel special.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you put together some notes for us today.
Yeah.
Because your mom likes this topic of hospitality.
She does.
And so
she does it well.
Yeah. And I knew this would be a softball for you.
Please.
So you could just absolutely crush it. Hit a home run. And Olivia, you asked the question, like, why are we talking about this on Mother's Day? Or like, why is this?
Yeah, because when I was first looking at the notes, I was like, great topic. Love this. I know Mom's really good at it. But this isn't a podcast to hone in on the special day of Mother's Day. It's an episode where I can appreciate my mom.
Yeah.
And then her spiritual gifts that the Lord's provided for her.
And I think that's the dynamic I'd like us to kind of consider is what is the, when you think of your mother, just in general, like when you're thinking of, Bethany, when you're thinking of your mom, or I'm thinking of my mom, like what are those gifts and talents and skills that they leveraged to make our lives more enriched? And so, and I, recognize that for some folks, Mother's Day is a hard day, right? And because maybe they grew up without a mom, like an absent mother, or they, some ladies haven't been able to be mothers for one reason or another. But we want to honor mothers today by talking to you about how God has wired you in this topic of hospitality. So you've done quite a bit of reading on this topic, quite a bit of studying. You're kind of naturally gravitate towards this. So as we talk, so this episode, we're going to talk about hospitality. And the question I asked Bethany to consider for today's podcast is I asked her what she's learned are the four most important things to think about when it comes to hospitality, or at least what you've wrestled with. Because I know you've done a lot of reading and you have lots of notes and highlights and books and quotes and all kinds of things. So to kind of pull it together into sort of like, but what rises to the surface when you think of hospitality? So as we go down that road, babe, you want to define for us hospitality as you've considered these things?
Sure. A generic definition of hospitality would be the practice of receiving and entertaining strangers and guests with kindness.
So where does that come from? Do you know?
The internet.
Okay, that's good.
But the definition I found several years ago that I had made a note and highlighted and kept was by Christine Pohl in her book, Making Room, Recovering Hospitality as a Christian Tradition. And she defines hospitality as this. Hospitality is simply a joy of life. As we welcome family, friends, and coworkers into loving places, we find mutual refreshment in shared meals, in conversations, and in the shelter of each other.
Did you, were you formally taught about hospitality growing up, or was it just something that you caught in the home you were in?
Probably caught. But in one of the points we'll talk about that we will say it's a family effort. I was brought in that family effort in how you do it. So when we first got married, I was really good at being a preacher's kid. I knew that role. I knew what you did when you weren't in the kitchen or when you weren't the mom. I knew the kid role. So then I had to switch in my head of so now I've got to be.
Yeah, because particularly if you're hosting as a family, everybody kind of plays their part. Do you growing up? Do you remember us having people over quite a bit? Does that seem like something that was noticeable for you?
I'd say you guys made it exciting.
Exciting? How so?
We actually looked forward to having people over. I know that maybe not be the case for a lot of people, where they just kind of dread it and they don't want people to walk into their spaces or even judge or worry about what they're serving, or it's just easier for people to go over to other people's houses because it involves a lot of work. But you guys made it more enjoyable, and how do we set up for the best intentions almost? Not to be we're going to show the best part of our life, but Andrew and I had very distinct manners in how we talked to the people, or at dinner when we'd have a new person over, we always asked a question. And it was the same question. And was it where's the best place you've ever traveled to or ever been? And then what's one place you would like to go to and why?
Yeah. And some of that was, is this getting into one of your points? Okay. I'm looking at Bethany for that because she's not saying anything.
No.
Okay.
Not that I... Who knows?
Well, I mean, in our dining room, we have a big map. It's
actually right behind my dad.
Yeah.
I'm staring directly at it.
It's like a big chalkboard type thing. And on it are a bunch of lines, drawn from a location in the world to a name, the last name of a friend of ours that we know in that location of the world. And so anytime we have people over, they end up asking, what's the story behind the map and all of the names? And so we share how these are the people we know. And early on, when you kids were young, we wanted you to learn about geography, not just politically, but relationally. How do we know these people? Yeah. How do we know about these places? And a lot of it is because of the people we know in those locations. And so that would kind of naturally tee up the question. Because one of the lines on there is to Vara Majudon, the Majudon family in Thailand. It's who are the Majudons? Oh, that's my friend from college. Oh, where are they? They're in Thailand. Oh, have you been to Thailand? Yeah, we've been to Thailand. It just kind of...
It's a good conversation starter because it's not small.
Yeah. It was even interesting. I recently went on a trip to Japan with some of my coworkers and the training team I'm on. And one night at dinner, I asked the guys, I said, how many countries have you all been in? And it went for, one guy was I've been in 6, no 7, 8. And then everybody starts getting out and they start, they're pulling out their phones and pulling up the maps and no, I've been to all these countries. So it was, it is an interesting conversation starter.
So.
Which is about hosting a moment, right? Yeah. For the purposes of getting to know one another. It
keeps Andrew and I locked in. Because I don't know if those who are listening remember being a kid and your parents are talking adult talk and time is going excruciatingly too slow. And then you're staring at your brother trying not to laugh, or you're playing footsies under the table. And then dad looks at us get it together.
Hey, knock it off.
Yeah. Which was a look I got a lot. Or we even took dishes back and washed the dishes and kickstarted that, or in asking the kind of questions at the table, like as Andrew and I's responsibility, made it more engaging for us that we have something important to say to you, and then they'll tell stories or build us some kind of imagination.
Yeah.
And then that's how you remember them. Like, oh, you went there. And it made it more enjoyable for Andrew and I. Anyway, so hospitality has been great on my end because, first of all, I love when we have a clean house and everything's vacuumed and you can smell it freshly mopped and mom's cooking something amazing. And it just gets you so excited, especially in the summer and it's like nice and warm and hot. And
or kind of those two scents, right? Like the freshly cut lawn and the house is clean and fresh.
It's a good evening.
Yeah. Or
you have something grilling.
Or the other time of year when it's like Christmas time and the Christmas smells and the music and the lights and all that kind of stuff. All right. Babe, you have a passage of scripture here you highlighted. Do you want to read that for us and then tell us why you selected this?
Yeah. Sometimes I like to read stuff out of the Message. It kind of changes up how you think you've heard scripture mentioned in the past. So 1 Thessalonians 4:7 in the Message reads, God hasn't invited us into a disorderly, grungy life, but into something holy and beautiful, as beautiful on the inside as the outside.
So why did you select that as it relates to hospitality?
Because I think hospitality, when it's planned well and repetitive, isn't disorderly and grungy. Mm-hmm. There are sometimes it flies by the seat of your pants or you pull something off unexpected, but when something is in your rhythm, it isn't usually disorderly and grungy. Because you've either valued it really high and you've made the effort to put it there.
Which I think it's important to say, like the key words here are disorderly and grungy, not expensive and fancy or inexpensive and cheap. Right? That's not there's not a value placed upon this. It's about how have you stewarded the resources you do have.
Yeah. So that it's holy and beautiful.
Yeah. Okay, so the question, what have you learned are the most important things about hospitality? Do you want to walk us through these?
Like list all four and then we'll go back?
Let's just do one. Let's just do one at a time.
Yeah. Okay. Number one, I said, hospitality is the art of giving yourself away for others, whether that's to your family, friends, small group, or a perfect stranger. And I say it's an art because you get better at it the more you do it. Just like anything. Like you can have a natural tendency to something, but when you practice it, it's like an art form. So once again, in Christine Pohl's book, Making Room, she says, I believe that hospitality means to give of yourself. In other types of services, you can give of your talents or skills or resources. The tasks aren't what hospitality is about. Hospitality is giving of yourself.
I have a question. So, based on that, are there times you can be hospitable outside of your home? Because when I hear hospitality, it's like inviting people into your physical house. But like, how do you do that when maybe you're not in your house? Like, is that a nature or a characteristic that you built? Like, how would you, do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Sure.
And then there's then you could be like, oh, you could be hospitable in another person's home and like give help and do that. But you don't want to be seen as, I'm also a host. Do you know what I'm trying to say?
Yeah. Sure. I think, well, I'll let your mom answer because I have a thought on this, but go ahead. What are your thoughts, babe?
Well, one of the thoughts is I'd say one of my spiritual gifts is acts of service. So hospitality fits under the acts of service. But I can be hospitable helping with an event. If I'm just getting chairs out or I'm greeting at the door or I'm greeting somewhere else, I can still have a heart turned towards other people. I can have a mind cleared of what's on my own agenda when I get home and just stay in the moment and serve the moment.
Because I know there's going to be scenarios where I'm moving to college. I don't know if I can have people over. Like, but I still want to be known as that hospitable friend.
Well, what I would say, one way to think about it is, what are the domains of space that I have responsibility and impact over, right? So it could even be like at a restaurant, do you have that space? No. Is that a domain you control? No. But do you have domain and control maybe over the moment? So the way you sit at the table, and the way you interact with the person you're having dinner with, hey, what are you going to order? What do you like? Oh, yeah, I had that before. You know what I mean? Like, just kind of that atmosphere, the way you interact with the waiter or waitress when they come to the table, like that, creating that hospitable moment, kind of coming back to these definitions of practicing, of receiving, entertaining folks, right? It is beyond just, are they at my home or not? I would even say, like, one of the reasons why I always like to keep my car clean is because I never know who I'm going to need to give a ride to.
Yeah.
And I think we've all been in those situations where you get into somebody's car and it's not clean, and you could just tell that maybe you're invading a private space, because they weren't expecting for anybody to be there. Every week when I do my training, there's always a group of chaplains. There's usually 2 or 3 chaplains that take the course that I teach. And on Thursdays, I'll take them out to lunch and then pick their brains of like, okay, what are you hearing in the course? What's working? What's not making sense? What feedback do you have for me? And there's usually one place I go to. And I usually drive. And so the night before, I just make sure my car's clean and in good order, so that when they come in, they're coming into a vehicle that's ready to receive them. Even something that small, right?
Right.
And I'm not saying it has to be detailed to the 9th degree, and I don't have a fancy car. It's nothing like that, but it shows a level of intentionality, right? It's that, going back to that First Thessalonians passage, it's orderly and clean, right? Versus disorderly and grungy. And then when we go to the restaurant, there's one restaurant I like to take the guys to, because some of the different chaplains I take have different dietary restrictions based upon their faith traditions. And they usually have a pretty broad spectrum of that can satisfy those restrictions. And the waitress there always gives me lip when I come in. She's always like, oh, geez, you're here again? I'm like, yep. And I'm going to take my regular table whether you like it or not. So like we have this little back and forth that we have with one another, which cracks all the, the chaplains I take, cracks them up. And then in that table, because it's a place that I frequent regularly, it's a place I'm familiar with, I don't have to look at the menu. The waitress knows what I want. She knows to bring me an Arnold Palmer for lunch. She knows I'm going to order the chicken sandwich, and she knows I'm going to get it with their handmade chips. Like, she knows this about me, right? So because of that, I can focus on the guys or the chaplains, because sometimes there's ladies there as well, and just host the moment as I interact with them. And so, to answer your question, is it just about receiving people in your home? I'd say, well, no, it's not just that.
Right.
I think at minimum, it probably begins with that, because that's a place that you can kind of control the distractions. Yeah. Right. And you can control a lot of unknown variables and the things that you're not in control of. But if somebody's wanting to get good at this, I think that's a really great place to start. And I would say, if you can't do it in your home, it's going to be really difficult to do it in other places.
That's good.
But if you can learn to start doing it there, you can kind of ripple out from that.
No, yeah. Because after you said that, then, I work at Chick-fil-A, and there's the very few nights, and I like to, I'm not going to say it, but we get the dining room shift, and a lot of people dread it because it's usually for a very long period of time. And you basically have like 4 duties. You have the bathroom, both of them. You have to do the play place, and then make sure all the trash is out, and then the floors are clean. And the majority of that takes place after we're closed. But it's evident to the customers that you're just standing there because, you really don't have anything to do because you don't want to be in the way of the bathroom because, I've been in other restaurants and I'm just like, really? Like, this is not the time. But, then it's like, what can I do now to help them? So I'm like, do you want a refill? Do you need anything else? Do you need napkins, sauces? You guys good? I can take your trash. And I like to be of service, but again, it's not my favorite shift, but I try to make it more enjoyable for me because then you'll meet people that you didn't expect to meet.
Well, I imagine that shift is more about focusing on servicing the customer than completing a task.
Yes.
Like in some of the other stations that you work, it's about how many shakes can I get, milkshakes can I get done?
Yeah.
Or how many drinks need to get prepared or how many bags need to get.
No, that's good. And my prayers started changing on my way to work. It used to be like, Lord, you know what this shift holds. I need it to go easy. I need it to go fast. And I'm like, in Jesus Christ, amen. And it was more demanding. And I was like, I'm not doing anything for our relationship. And so I started praying, Lord, you know what this shift holds. I really don't care how long it takes. I don't care how it makes me feel. But what I do want is a spiritual encounter. Mm-hmm. And there are times where I felt like I did that right. Most of the time, it's a very humbling experience. And I had a dining room shift, and it was like the first night. Like, I was like, Lord, I just want a spiritual encounter. I don't know what you want me to teach me. Like, I don't know what you needed to teach me, but I pray that it's just evident. And like, I was cleaning the bathrooms at like 8:30. We were closing in half an hour. And this lady in the stall was like, I just want to pray over you real quick.
Wow.
Like in a place that smells not great.
Yeah.
And you're doing a job that a lot of people don't want to do.
Or avoid.
Right.
Avoid doing.
Yeah. So it was great. And, it made me kind of feel like, oh, I should do that too. Because she doesn't know who I am. Well, she doesn't know that I'm a Christian. So it's easy for me to receive. But it might not be her, it might not be easy for her to say.
That's a bold step to take, yeah.
So, anyway,
Well, and I think, too, with this first point you made, babe, which is the hospitality is the art of giving yourself away for others, the win of a successful night was not, did we have fun? Or did we enjoy that? Or was it worth our while? Those aren't the bullseyes that you're targeting. The bullseye is, did they feel welcomed and entertained and appreciated? I read a book where somebody was, they kind of were teasing out some of these words, and the word hospital and hospitality have the same root, meaning it's a place to be cared for.
Yeah.
So in this realm of hospitality, it's not about what's received. It's about what's provided, which leads to the second point you have for us.
Seek to serve, not to impress.
And that's very tempting.
Mm-hmm. We're not working towards a magazine cover to be perfect or to communicate, I have it all together. Because those places aren't necessarily comfortable if you're afraid to sit down or you're afraid to mess it up or you're not working towards a still picture. You're working on the environment being what God wants it to be, what you want your home to be. So,
and I think, the way even like the dining room table we're sitting at we picked this type of dining room table because this was a floor room. What was the store? World Market.
World Market, Cost Plus,
and kind of has a farm style type look to it. So it looks like it can get beat up, but still maintain its aesthetic design. And our conversation was, because we were looking for a new dining room table, something that would be a bit larger so that we could host more people. And as we were talking about what it was, that was one of the criteria. We wanted to get a table that if people had their kids sitting at it, they didn't have to worry about their kids ruining something nice.
Yeah.
But the idea was like, no, this is a table that is a pretty stout table. You know, take quite a bit of beating for a little kid to mess it up. Although I've been in those homes, and this is not a critique on them, but I've been in those homes where everything was so like formal, and they were hosting us and they were doing their best, but everything was so formal that I was afraid to touch anything for fear of like, you know, making a mess or leaving fingerprints or doing something wrong. And like, those moments make me stressed more than anything. So I struggle in those moments, but, what else do you got for us here, babe?
So we're not wanting to show off, and we're wanting to share what we have with others. One of my favorite authors, favorite devotional book, hands down, is Shauna Nyquist's Savor. And so in her book on December 13th, she made this quote that I have written down and saved.
Is this like an Advent or like a daily devotional?
It's a 365 day. But this one happened
the December
to fall.
13th.
Yeah, this was the day of the year
Gotcha.
that it was in. She said, people aren't craving perfection or longing to be impressed. They're longing to feel like they're home. If you create a space full of love and character and creativity of soul, no matter how small or undone or odd, they'll take off their shoes and curl up with gratitude and rest. And I feel like that's what I work towards.
You work towards what? What part of that are you working towards?
That people can feel like they can curl up and take their shoes off and rest because we've created a place full of love and character and creativity and soul. I feel like we have a real eclectic taste anyway, whether that's from places we've been or things I won't let go of or stuff I was handed
Mostly
down or
that.
antiques.
Mostly things she won't let go of.
That I'm like, oh,
Christmas ornaments. Like I just have so much.
yes,
That
you
I feel
do.
like people can bond with something we have or have some kind of
If I keep enough
conversation with.
knickknacks.
I'll meet everyone's desire. Anyway. So I love that quote.
Is that your justification for hanging on to so many of these little things?
No, but
Did
it
you see
just
the
makes
new
life
one
so
she
much
got
fun.
at the estate sale?
Don't tell him.
What?
She got more ornaments at the estate sale.
Oh. So, but for those of you that don't know, Christmas ornaments is Bethany's catnip. Is that a good way to say it? Like you see it and you just want it. And the question I always ask,
Just one more.
the question I always ask is what? If you get that,
What are you giving away?
What
If
do
you
we-
say yes to this, what are you saying no
oh,
to?
it's a no to something else. What are we saying no to?
It's like, don't take my stuff. Mom's like, we'll just get rid of one of your things for another thing of my things.
Why do you think do you think, well, have you had to fight the urge to not impress? Because if your point is seek to serve, not impress.
Yes. I have to check myself all the time. Why am I doing this?
That's true.
And can I do this and not bring attention to it?
Or can I do this and they receive it? And if they don't say anything about it, that's okay.
It's fine.
I know after you said that, I just thought, like, I feel like you can go into homes and they seek to impress. And then they'll be like, oh, then you volunteer next. Oh, you can do it at my house. But do I have to have that same level? And it,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? And it feeds into that comparison.
Yeah.
It's not a competition.
Right.
Yeah. And I think that's the danger with a lot of these things is people, even, I think sometimes people don't host, not because their home isn't well ordered and not because they don't have the resources or skills to do it, but because they're afraid it might not be good enough for others. And I think there's some folks they're giving into a lie the enemy is trying to have them believe that, so-and-so should host because they've got the bigger house or the fancier house or the fancier yard, or they got the kids, and which have they have more toys or the better gaming system or the fancier.
Or sometimes it comes down to space.
Whatever.
Like it's
sure there may be practical constraints that make sense, right? I mean, there's times when we've been part of small groups and people that hosted, it made sense for them to host because they had the larger house, but it was because we also had 13 kids in the house. And we needed a room that was on the other end of the house for the kids to play in, so the adults could, have prayer and Bible study with one another. So, so logistically, sometimes it makes more sense. But I think there can be some folks that hide behind. I think one of the things that I think is supposed to mark us as believers is how we steward our homes for God's kingdom, because if you think about a church and you were to ask the typical person, how much space does your church have? Probably everybody's going to think of their church facility. I don't know, is it 26,000 square feet, 18,000 square, 110,000 square, if it's a huge church or whatever it is. Because we don't think of our homes as outposts for the kingdom.
That's true.
Right. So if you think of, if we started thinking in those terms, wait, no, in the military, we have these little, in a kind of a battle space, they'll have what are called FOBs, forward operating base. And it's not the main center, but it's this location that has a skeleton crew to support the mission, that needs to be supported to accomplish the objectives that need to be accomplished so that battles can won and the war can be, there can be victory in war. And so, what if we saw our homes as those forward operating bases, those places where people could experience God's kingdom? And I think hospitality is a huge part of that. What does it look, often, how many times in the Gospels is it talking about these encounters? The next podcast we have coming out is about an encounter somebody had with the Lord over
a dinner.
And, and she wasn't hosted well. She hosted,
but not in her home.
Right. But it wasn't her home, but she had an impact over the moment. Right.
Yeah.
So I think it's one of those, giving into this lie that I have to be impressive, or it has to be fancy, or it has to be, all of these things is playing into a value system that the kingdom does not call us into value. Any other thoughts on that one, or you want to move to the next one, my lady?
We can move to 3.
Okay, 3. Number 3.
Hospitality works quietly and mundanely first.
What does that mean?
This is another point Christine Pohl made. She said, "We cannot separate the goodness and the beauty of hospitality from its difficulty. It's a paradoxical way. Hospitality is simultaneously mundane and sturdy, mysterious and fragile." I think if hospitality was easy, everybody would do it. And it can't all be done on the seat of your pants. You need to plan. If we're having it in our home, we've picked a day of the week where we've cleaned.
Yeah.
We've gone grocery shopping for something. I've cut flowers from the yard, or we've shoveled the sidewalk for an event. There's a lot of quiet work behind before you say, okay, I'm done with that and I'm switching gears and now people are here and I'm not going to think about it anymore. It's gotten as far as I'm going to get it in my head or in preparation, and now I'm going to turn and be people focused.
Yeah.
So I'd say it has this mundane repetitiveness. You can't clean once and it be good for a month. You're going to have to clean before it and then clean before the next one and
clean right after it. Depending on
that small
the
group we had 35 people that would come every week, and we had 35 pair of shoes.
Yeah,
at their front door.
Yes, we planted a church, and when we were starting it,
all the shoes.
We ended up lots of people over at the house, and into that point, I think hospitality becomes not just something that occasionally happens. It becomes a part of, at least for us, maybe not so much in the last year because of operational tempo and like some of the other responsibilities we've had to carry in other places. But I know that there's a piece of this where it very much becomes a lifestyle rhythm. Like you're cleaning on Saturday because you know you're hosting on Tuesday, and we're gonna keep these things picked up because we know we got folks coming, and so it just and we need to be able to keep extra room in the closet when fall gets here because people are going to start wearing jackets and they're going to need a place to, or where are we going to put jackets if they don't fit in the coat closet? Where, like all of those little things start playing out, and they're not difficult questions to think through, but to host well, again, not to impress, but just to serve.
And it helps you be prepared to serve.
Yeah.
It's like preparations that aren't, like you said, they're not used to be impressive, but it helps you be a better host.
Yeah. And I think along with that, it forces the leverage of, the discipline of good stewardship, caring for your things, not for the benefit of yourself alone, but for the benefit of of those that you're having in your home.
Yeah.
And I'd say through the years, we've had small groups that formed around an age group. So when we had little toys upstairs, it hit a great target audience of lots of little kids who needed a lot of little toys.
Why are you smirking, Olivia?
No, go ahead, Mom.
But then we also have that little caveat where we have loved small groups with a variety of ages because the older ones speak into us younger ones and say, that's really not a big deal. Or that's a very big deal. You should take that more seriously.
As far as like older adults.
Yeah, an older voice. So sometimes it's easy to wallow in your own age group. Oh, I can't ever pick these kids up. Oh, when are they going to sleep through the night? Oh, whatever. And you can kind of wallow in all the problems of the stages you find yourself in.
Yeah.
And kind of commiserate together in the misery. But we found the best groups are a variety of ages of adults, and then they speak into
And that's like what community is used for. Like today, I was meeting with a group of seniors from my church, and our youth pastor wanted to just kind of like, these are the things to consider as you're walking into the adulthood. And he's like, when you're finding a church, find that one of a diverse age group, because half of them are going to go to Liberty University. And Alex, my youth pastor, has graduated from there. And he goes, okay, great. I love convocation that they make all the students go to, but that is not church because you do not have a diversity in people because it's all college age students. It's like you have to go find a community that will, he goes, those things can't hurt you, but that's not the same as a church or being involved in something greater than you are. So.
Yeah. And I think, like now you and I'm looking at Bethany, you and I are now in a season where we're about to see our youngest child leave the nest.
Dad's excited.
You keep saying that. Have I ever said I'm excited?
Yes.
Oh, have I?
Can't wait to get you to get out of my house so you can start paying me rent.
Oh, that's true. I did say that.
So let's not throw hands.
But it is interesting to interact with some of these family members some folks that we know that have younger kids. They're littler, and I think in some ways, it reminds me of how far we've come and how, things that were a big deal at that life stage, God was faithful and He navigated and He provided, and so I think that kind of intergenerational pull isn't just about offering advice; it's also about reflecting on what God has done. And remembering and then taking confidence in that because of what might be ahead.
Yeah. And I will say, it helps you become more comfortable with people of different ages.
Yeah. And I think, too, as it relates to hospitality, the more diversity you can have in your homes, of whether that's age-wise or ethnic-wise or, people from different countries or, their native language is not your native language, but they're willing to break bread with you at your table. having those sort of, and this is something I've constantly found true, having those sort of interactions, particularly if they are with believers, one of the things you find is the things that unite us as humans, as people that are made in the image of God, if we're both believers, as people who've been saved by Christ, like those are incredibly unifying things that bring a lot of clarity to the things in life that actually matter, not the divisive stuff that oftentimes our culture wants us to pick a side on that in the grand scheme of eternity probably isn't going to end up being that big of a deal.
Yeah.
And so I think like good hospitality is about finding those common spaces, those common places of interaction with one another and letting that interaction build relational connections and trust.
No, yeah.
That, you know, I remember one time we were hosting a Bible study in our home, and we had been doing it for quite a while. And we had one person that we had a young couple that was kind of rediscovering church. They had kind of been raised in church, walked away in their college years, had gotten married, came back, and we were pastoring the church they came back to. And then there was somebody who was a bit older than us that was in the group, had, you know, steady Freddie, always walked with the Lord and stuff. And we'd been in a small group with one another. So we're, you know, sharing meals with one another, praying for one another, in God's word with one another every week for, you know, months. And then we were in like some kind of political season. And as the young couple who was rediscovering church was getting their coat on, they said, the other person said something about abortion. They're like, well, I can't vote for that person because of their stance on abortion. And the young couple was like, what do you mean? And they're like, why? The older person was like, well, I'm pro-life. And they're like, well, we're pro-choice. And it was this really great moment where you saw these two people kind of not know what to do with the moment because the stereotype of what a pro-lifer is or what a pro-choice person is didn't match the relational dynamics that had been invested in those people's lives.
Yeah.
And so you could tell they were like, well, this is not the time or space to get into this, but it's sort of like the pro-choice people are going, well, we love you and we really like you. And you're not one of those crazy, you know, conservative pro-life lunatics. And the pro-life person is looking at him like, well, you're not one of those, you know, blue-haired hippie, like uber liberal, you know,
donkey loving.
Yeah, like you're not that either. And so it was this, because they had gotten to know each other in every other area of their life, except in that, you know, probably other topics, but a topic that if you were to ask them individually, how important is this to you? They would have said, oh, very, very, very important. But over the last 4 or 5 months, it had never come up. But a lot of other things that were incredibly important to them had come up, and that's where they found support in one another. So my point is like that we had them in our home together for an extended period of time, finding all of this other common ground, that when they came into an area that they didn't have common ground in, all of a sudden it was like, wait, this is odd. But we now have so much trust equity built up. We can listen to one another on this topic and hear from where the other one's coming from.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm doing more talking than our guest is. I know exactly. I know there's people listening to this podcast going, I thought Bethany was the guest. I was doing all this talking.
No. You know the movie Mr.
They're
Mom?
thinking he's
Is
having
that what
to
it's
help her,
called?
poor thing. Mr. Mom.
Mr. Mom.
There is.
Is that what it's called?
There's
With
Michael Keaton.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Saw
Have you
that.
seen that movie?
Yeah, you should have. We skipped a lot of parts.
Yeah. We did. Okay.
Number 4.
Number 4. Last one. Bring us home.
Hosting is a family effort, each one doing their part. So make it a way of living that shows your children by example the practice of hospitality.
Which you kind of already touched on.
So from your perspective, Olivia, how did we, like what, I'd be curious to know, like from your vantage point, when we were hosting people in our homes, whether it's for a small group or we're having people for dinner, like when you were younger, how did you what was your part in all of that? Do you remember?
Yeah, and we like still do it. I mean, we always pick up our stuff. Andrew, my brother, really didn't pick up a ton of stuff. I like to leave little things in every room.
Hold on. Yeah. Why didn't Andrew have to pick up a ton of stuff?
Because he had everything in his room.
Yeah.
And that was his like place.
Yeah.
But I liked to have little pieces in every room that would make you guys think of me.
Oh, is that what you're doing?
Yeah.
Bobby pin here, pair of socks there.
Well, that's nowadays.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think. Are we talking about last week or are we talking about when you were a little kid?
Okay. So we picked it, like that was a rule. Like, I didn't really worry about cooking because that wasn't but I, again, worried about did the dishes, or Andrew and I vacuumed or dusted or just picked up things and folded what needed to be folded. And we could have had that rule. But it's not like you have these set things that you have to do every time you host. Because there's been times where or for like Christmas dinner, we have like an expected way of how the evening's going to go. And then what are the things that need to get done before then? So it's like these list of expectations.
There's kind of like family rules.
Yeah.
A lot of them unspoken.
Yeah. And then there's days where it's like after church and Dad's like, oh, we're also having this person over for lunch. And Mom was like, oh, I didn't think we were going to have anyone over, because that's happened before. Or
Have I done that very much?
Not a ton, but
it's
happened. Would you agree?
Yeah, but
Yeah, so it's like that's a different set of expectations, because now I'm down to 15 minutes and
yeah,
it's a little bit more rush, but I still have a responsibility, because if I don't do my responsibility that Dad expects of me, I will hear it.
What will you hear?
Now that I'm like 18, I'm not going to have my toys taken away and given to the Goodwill, but
Or the threat of that.
Or the threat. Like, I'd be like, okay. It's more of like, you could have done more and you chose not to. And why was that? Give me the reason why. And then what are you going to do to fix it?
Sounds like good parenting right there.
Sounds like a heartache kind of conversation that I just don't want to have.
My second point under my topic.
Oh, yeah. So you got sub-points.
Yes.
Under
is
hosting
to
as a
remember
family
to serve your family, your spouse, and your children with the same attention to detail that you serve guests to, that you don't know as well.
So what's behind that? Why are you saying that?
Sometimes it's easier to serve people you don't know because they have no expectation of you, and people that do know you or know what you can do, and then you choose not to.
And it's easy to like put on a facade.
Can be hurtful. And my little sub point is your children see through your motives.
Oh, yeah.
Like your kids would know.
If you're trying to be impressive.
Yeah. Or if you're really celebrating them for whatever occasion it is.
That's true.
I would celebrate them losing their teeth. I would celebrate report cards. I would celebrate different things. So if you don't celebrate your people, but you want to celebrate strangers, what does that say? I feel like your family doesn't mind helping you host well when you host them well.
Yeah.
And out of the family's abundance, you're helping other people.
Yeah.
So, and then consistently serve as a family so that everyone can participate. So if your family's going to choose to say, we're going to start a small group, we'll host a small group from our church, or host a small group.
Coworkers over from.
That you pick a night that isn't already committed to something else. Like, don't try to stick it in necessarily consistently, because something may always come up. Traffic may always be bad, or there's always that sport that plays on that night.
That's good.
Or a music lesson. Like, try to pick a night where everyone can participate consistently. And then kill it.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I think, there's been times I've been, invited into people's homes, and you get there and they're like, oh, yeah, let's say it's a husband and wife team or something like that. maybe you and I go together and it's like, oh yeah, the husband's, he's gone. He had to run the kids here and he's going to run there and then he's going to be here. So he should be here in the next 30, 45 minutes. And like in that moment, personally, I feel like we've invaded their home. Do you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like we could have delayed this 30 to 45 minutes and now it just feels kind of awkward and
disjointed
and and then there's that kind of, at least in my mind, I'm playing back conversations and going, did I create an expectation that it happened at this time, that it didn't need to happen at this time? And you know what I mean? It just doesn't play well to the moment. And then there's other times we've shown up and maybe one of the kids is gone and I was like, oh yeah, one of the kids is gone. But we're having neighbors bring them back because we wanted to receive you. So the neighbors picking the kids up and like in that moment you feel like, oh wow, they're ready to receive us. Not that I'm looking to be impressed in that area, but that feeling of we've reordered some things and leveraged some of our other relationships to strengthen this relationship.
And it's like kind of what Mom said, like it feels like an environment where I can rest and actually step into something.
And not be more nervous.
Oh, yeah. I get really cold. Like, I'm currently using a blanket. But, it's so uncomfortable when you're at someone's house. And, even if you've been there for a while, I'm like, can I use one of your blankets?
Oh, yeah.
That's a touchy subject. And, some of them are, they offer. Anyone cold? I'm like, bring it here. Anyway, sorry.
No, but I mean, I think that goes back to that, even as we were going through your notes earlier, Bethany, we were talking about how, what is something if you got a home with kids, what is something every kid can do? Even if they're 3 or 4, how can they participate in the hosting of the event, And I remember when you guys were super little, obviously we'd have you pick up your toys and things like that. But we'd also let you answer the door, because that's kind of a grown-up thing to do when you're super tiny, right?
Hit that unlock button. You're like, only 2 of us in this room actually can do it on, not at a specific time.
Yeah.
I get to be the big person.
Yeah. And to, be that first face that welcomes these people in. Or you could be the little, hey, you grab your 6-year-old, hey, why don't you go ask if anybody's cold and wants a blanket? All of a sudden that they're part of the experience.
Yeah. Oh, that reminds me. So when I was in elementary school, my mom helped with the PSS.
What is PSS?
What is PSS, Mom?
Parents and staff for students.
I didn't know that. I just know it. The PSS. It's like the PSS.
PSA.
Or no, when you
PTA,
write a letter.
Parent
when
teacher
when you write a letter and you're like
postscript.
PS.
Oh,
and then you do
PSS.
Or PPS.
Whatever.
Anyway, so that's how I always kind of I don't know what it stands for.
That's funny.
Anyway, so my mom helped run that. And so basically when there was teacher work day, my mom would come in and bring in food with other moms that were involved in what the school was promoting or just wanting to be a part of the school in some way, shape, or form to kind of give back. And so I would always want to come because what's more fun than coming into school on a day you don't have to come in? It totally changes how you perceive anything. Anyway, so I would be her little buddy. And how many years was I with you for that? Maybe 3, 4?
I did it. You're K through 4.
Yeah, so I would kind of just tag along with Mom because either Mom didn't know where to put me for 3 hours that day because either you were working, my dad, or Andrew was at friend's house, or I would just always tag along with Mom. All that to say, there was a little beverage bar, and then there was the food bar. So Mom would kind of just make sure everyone knew what kind of food there was and where to find all the name tags or where to go for certain things. And then they would come over to me, and then I'd be like, what would you like to drink? And that, I would pour drinks for them, or then go around and ask because at that time I was, wanting to be a waitress.
And how did that make you feel?
Oh, so important, because then they appreciate that I'm there actually doing something because I don't think a teacher expects a teacher or a student to serve them.
Sure.
So I think it puts them in that like abnormal, they appreciate it more than if I didn't.
And you either saw some of your brother's teachers who knew who you were, or
Yeah.
you got to see your old teachers that you just hadn't run into in a while.
Or I love it when mom has a specific nickname for me and then teachers catch on to it and then they start saying it in the hall. And I'm like, you don't know me like that.
You don't have permission.
You don't, yeah, I'm not going to answer. Anyway, so that was kind of like my role. Like,
That was your role. And your mom, listen to all that preparation that your mom did to get you ready.
for
to
Chick-fil-A.
work the dining room at Chick-fil-A. She set you up
Years of
for this
practice, you're
first-
just ready to do it.
Yeah.
For 5-star fast
Man,
food.
alive. She should
welcome.
get some of your tips a few nights for that. Don't you think?
What
No?
tips?
Oh, okay. Babe, thanks for being on the podcast.
Thanks for inviting me.
Do you have any last rounds? Anything you want to share before we wrap up? She's going through her pages of notes. And
Printed.
when is your book coming out on hospitality?
I know. I don't know yet.
When is your book coming out, Dad?
Still working on it.
Okay.
So I'm going to take that as a no. That you do have something to say. You're just
You're
looking
just
for it.
finding it.
I did have one. Here you go.
Okay.
It's a quote from Brother Jeremiah, who said,
Who's Brother Joe?
I don't know, but it's quoted to Brother Jeremiah, and it said, we always treat guests as angels, just in case.
Oh, look at that.
There you go.
Well, thank you for being a guest on our podcast today.
Thanks.
Did we treat you like an angel?
It went better than anticipated.
Hey,
so
see,
that's
there
good.
you go.
She's ready for the next episode.
That's right.
Hospitality, number 2.
That's right. Well, we want to thank you for listening to the podcast today. If you liked this and you want more of Bethany, you can feel free to email us at hello@thisresilientsoul.com. If you have ideas on what we can do to strengthen the quality or expand the impact of this podcast, we look forward to hearing from you. You can rate, review, rank, subscribe, follow, what all of the, there's a bunch of buttons. We just want you to hit them, smash them, like them all, so we can get the word out about this. And do us a favor, maybe today, that if you know somebody that could could be inspired by this topic of hospitality, share this with them. Help us get the word out.
Happy Mother's Day.
And happy Mother's Day.
Make sure you recognize your mom.
Babe, happy Mother's Day.
Thank you.
Thanks for being on our Mother's Day. It's not really a Mother's Day, but it's our podcast with your mother on it.
Yes.
So that makes it our Mother's Day podcast.
Yeah.
All right.
Tell your mom what you like about her.
Hey, there you go. Host her well.
Yes.
Thank you all for listening.